By early 1918, Germany was in a bit of a pickle. A 4-year-long war, a British naval blockade turning the home front into a nationwide soup kitchen, and the impending arrival of several million very enthusiastic, very well-fed Americans. But hey, on the bright side, Russia had just tapped out of the war, freeing up 500,000 German soldiers from the Eastern Front. General Erich Ludendorff, a man whose strategic brilliance was matched only by his spectacular lack of a plan B, looked at this situation and cooked up a masterpiece. The plan, codenamed Operation Michael, was elegantly simple. Use all these new troops to punch a hole straight through the Allied lines, split the British from the French, and win the war. Just like that. A final glorious knockout blow before those pesky Yanks could even unpack their bags. He would use brand new infiltration tactics with elite soldiers called stormtroopers who were trained to bypass strong points and cause chaos in the rear. It was a revolutionary concept for a war defined by moving 3 feet at a time. What could possibly go wrong with a plan that hinges entirely on everything going perfectly? The offensive kicked off at 4:40 a.m. on March 21, 1918, with what can only be described as industrial-scale anger. Over 6,500 German artillery guns fired more than 3 million shells in 5 hours. They called it the Feuerwalze, or fire waltz, a creeping barrage of high explosives, gas, and smoke that vaporized the British front lines. It was one of the most intense bombardments in human history, designed to obliterate everything. Then, as the stormtroopers went over the top, they got an unearned gift from the gods of war: a thick, dense fog. The German soldiers, equipped with compasses and a terrifying amount of motivation, slipped through the British lines like ghosts. They completely bypassed machine gun nests and command posts, appearing out of the mist to overwhelm utterly confused defenders. The British Fifth Army, holding that particular sector, simply disintegrated. In a single day, the Germans advanced over 14 kilometers, an achievement that seemed like science fiction after years of trench warfare stalemate. The initial results weren't just good, they were unbelievably, terrifyingly good. This is the part of the story where we learn that being wildly successful can be a huge problem. The German army advanced so quickly that they literally ran away from their own food and ammunition. The supply corps, still relying heavily on horses and carts, couldn't possibly keep up with the infantry's blistering pace. Furthermore, the ground they were conquering was the old Somme battlefield from 1916, a hellscape of craters, mud, and unexploded ordnance. It wasn't exactly a superhighway for getting supplies to the front. Then, the starving German soldiers stumbled upon abandoned British supply depots, and everything fell apart. They found warehouses full of things they hadn't seen in years: canned beef, white bread, chocolate, and barrels of booze. The offensive quite literally paused so the exhausted, malnourished troops could have the feast of their lives. Ludendorff, meanwhile, seemed to get drunk on his own success, constantly changing the objective. First, push west. No, split the British and French. Wait, let's attack Amiens. This indecisiveness bled the offensive of its momentum, proving that a plan is only as good as the logistics and clear-headed leadership behind it. The Allied reaction to this breakthrough was, to put it mildly, a complete and total panic. For a few days, it genuinely looked like the war was lost. The French and British commanders started squabbling, each trying to pull troops back to protect their own interests. The French to defend Paris, the British to save the Channel ports. It was this moment of crisis that forced them to do something they'd successfully avoided for 4 years: cooperate. At a meeting in Doullens, France on March 26th, they finally agreed to a unified command structure, putting the French general Ferdinand Foch in charge of all Allied armies on the Western Front. This was a huge deal. It meant for the first time there was one person making the big strategic calls. Meanwhile, the British Field Marshal Douglas Haig, a man not known for his soaring rhetoric, issued a now famous order of the day. He declared, "With our backs to the wall, each one of us must fight on to the end." It was a grim, desperate message that somehow managed to stiffen the resolve of the battered British troops. The panic was starting to turn into organized, stubborn resistance. After Operation Michael stalled, Ludendorff, demonstrating the tactical flexibility of a sledgehammer, decided the solution was to do the exact same thing somewhere else. This led to a series of follow-up offensives, each with a cool-sounding code name and the same predictable outcome. First came Operation Georgette in the north, an attempt to capture the vital channel ports. The Germans smashed through the Portuguese lines. Yes, Portugal was there, and made terrifying gains. But again, they exhausted themselves, lost their best men, and were eventually stopped by regrouping Allied forces. Then came Blücher-Yorck against the French, which was so surprisingly successful that German troops reached the Marne River, just 90 kilometers from Paris. They even started shelling the city with the Paris gun, a super long-range cannon that caused immense psychological terror. Yet again, the story was the same: a spectacular advance, overstretched supply lines, and eventual exhaustion. The Germans were winning battles, but bleeding themselves white, trading the lives of their irreplaceable veteran stormtroopers for strategically useless, devastated French countryside. All this time, the American expeditionary forces had been arriving in France, and the Germans had largely dismissed them as amateurs who wouldn't be ready to fight. This turned out to be a slight miscalculation. In June, at a place called Belleau Wood, the U.S. Marines were thrown into the line to stop the German advance on Paris. The Marines, full of aggressive spirit and a complete disregard for European-style trench warfare, attacked relentlessly. Their tactics were costly and sometimes clumsy, but their sheer ferocity shocked the battle-weary Germans. This was the turning point. Ludendorff launched one final offensive in July, the Second Battle of the Marne. But this time, the Allies knew it was coming. General Foch employed a defense-in-depth strategy, leaving the frontline trenches mostly empty and pulling the main defensive force back. The German artillery barrage smashed into nothing, and their infantry walked straight into a kill box of machine guns and pre-sighted artillery. On July 18th, Foch unleashed a massive counterattack with hundreds of tanks, hitting the tired German flank. The hunter had officially become the hunted. The spring offensive was over. Germany had thrown every last bit of its strength into one final roll of the dice and lost spectacularly. The numbers are just staggering. They inflicted around 850,000 casualties on the Allies, but they suffered over 1 million themselves. Critically, these weren't just any soldiers. Germany had lost the very best of its army, the experienced shock troops who could not be replaced. The German army's morale, which had soared in March, completely collapsed. The soldiers knew the war was lost. August 8, 1918 was dubbed the Black Day of the German army, when Allied forces shattered their lines at Amiens, and German troops surrendered in droves. Ludendorff himself had a nervous breakdown, realizing the war he promised to win was unwinnable. He finally had to tell the Kaiser the truth. It was time to ask for an armistice. In a perfect, crushing irony, the Grand Offensive, designed to force a victorious peace for Germany, had done nothing but hasten its total and utter defeat. It was a masterclass in snatching catastrophe from the jaws of desperation. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds.